Daniel Libeskind, welcome to the Royal Institute of British Architects
Thank you so
and the
much.
President's Office. We're pleased just that you're here.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
I wanted to start with a question about architectural expression. Your buildings have a really powerful presence, and they have an energy, and one can think of strong buildings in the city and the contribution that strong buildings make in that city. Very often they're controversial, and then they become absorbed and then admired. And I think a lot of people say that also about some of your buildings, and I think personally of the Imperial War Museum in the north. What are your views about that? And are there buildings that have now just been simply accepted and enjoyed by the people who use them?
Well, I don't shy from controversy. I don't shy away. And the buildings that I love, many of them, whether it's the Sydney Opera House, whether it's Mies van der Rohe's National Gallery in Berlin, whether it's Frank Lloyd Wright's Guggenheim Museum, were very controversial. And I think one has to do something that one really believes in, not just for the market of the time, but something that really, and of course it is always a balancing act, and one has to believe in it, one has to do it well, and the rest is history.
Mm. You talk a great deal about the emotive side of architecture and the experiential side of architecture. There seems to be a very core element in your work.
I think so. I think I begin with experience, and I try to end with experience, because otherwise architecture will be just an abstraction. And one has to base it on experience, both personal experience and experience of the people who will be using the building, who will be around the buildings. And to me, that's far more potent than any theory of architecture, because unless it is based on the human being, on the person, it is just an object.
It is, because I've heard you say that architecture should touch the heart, which I thought was a really lovely phrase.
Well, I really mean it. I think many architects believe that it's more an intellectual pursuit, and it is. But unless it is connected to the heart, to the emotional sense of a person, it would just be a commodity. And I think everything that I love, the arts themselves, are about emotion. A great book can be intellectual,
Absolutely.
but it finally is an emotional experience.
Yeah.
Film, piece of music, theater, and so on.
You're here to contribute to the Dream Builders series, and you follow in the likes of Renzo Piano, Zaha Hadid, Santiago Calatrava, and Norman Foster concludes the series. Like them, you're a very successful architect. But I think we both know that to be a successful architect, one has to be more than just simply a designer of buildings. One needs a business acumen, a tenacity, a political awareness. What are the sort of skills that you think you have that have actually enabled you to deliver the buildings that you do beyond your undoubted design awareness?
Well, you have to be able to communicate to the clients, to the public at large, what you're doing, and you have to demonstrate your willingness to go to the marathon, not just a short-range engagement. So yes, it is a matter of discipline, it's a matter of commitment, but it is a matter of conviction that has to be expressed very often, not just through drawings, but through convincing people by communicating something. And I have always believed that architecture is about communication from the beginning to its end. And one starts with that.
Yeah, I mean, I like that notion of communication, because from taking an idea and then communicating it to a client, to communicating it to users, and then even to the people who are building it, is so essential in terms of what we do.
It is, because without communication, without a meaning, without memory, without the spiritual aspect of architecture would only be an abstract operation of production. But because it is an art, a civic art, it requires a communication, and often of something which is very vulnerable, which is not just an idea, but a spirit, a sense of presence, a sense of the past also, a sense of tradition and its movement forward. So I believe in the communication.
Yeah. I want to touch on something that actually probably underpins the expression in your work, and I'm minded of the exhibition in the Museum of Modern Art over 20 years ago now, when the word deconstructivism was actually first coined. I'm very wary of labels and styles in architecture, thinking that actually there has to be something far more substance to an approach to architecture. What's your view about that that label of deconstructivism. Have you ever found it to be a sort of useful shorthand for you?
No, I never found that label useful. I mean, it's a word from philosophy, from
From
literature. It doesn't seem to fit architecture at all. And I, from the beginning, I thought it was a misnomer because architecture is about construction. It's not about deconstruction. Whatever you do, you're doing something that is constructive. So I thought, but the label, I think, just showed the change of time, the change, like the label existentialist back in the 60s or 50s signified a change of attitude to the world. I think this label also signified a change of attitude towards cities, towards architecture, towards the art of making space.
Because it seems to me that there's so much more that underpins your work. As I said earlier, beyond the label, you know, they're just spaces to experience.
You're very perceptive. You're right. The term deconstruction is a very specific theoretical term, which has very little to do with actually making a building, with making a piece of a city or a neighborhood. It seems to be too reductive in terms of the richness that architecture, I believe, represents.
So going beyond that, then, I mean, what have been your sources of inspiration, and who has inspired you in the work that you're doing now?
Well, I've been inspired by the humanistic tradition of architecture. There's a lot of technology, a lot of science in architecture, as we all know, but I've always been inspired by the humanities, literature, the visual arts, music, and those are really my sources. I think those are everyone's sources. We are not just professionals to build buildings, but the building must embody, I think, something that goes beyond the building. And I think good buildings have always traditionally embodied amazing things that once we enter them, we understand there's much more than meets the eye in a building.
I think a lot of people actually don't realise that humanist quality to your work, actually. I think, to me, it comes across very clearly.
Thank you. I think it's something important because I don't start with the fact that I want to make an object, a nice elevation, a nice facade, but what is the meaning of a building? Why is it there? Who is it for? And so on and so on. I think that is the evocation, really, of the great traditions of architecture. It's Renaissance, the Greek traditions globally, which considered architecture for the human spirit.
Can we touch on the Jewish Museum in Berlin, which I thought certainly was a building that first brought you to my attention? And I guess in many ways it's a building that, because of its symbolism and its meaning, you know, it's going to be there for in 200 years' time, I guess. That sort of concept of architecture and permanence, are you very proud of that? Is it something that...
Well, I'm proud of it. First of all, it was my first building. I never even built a small building, so it was really my first concrete building. But I am proud of it because it's about memory. It's about bringing something about the tragic history of the Jewish people in Europe, the extermination. How do we move across the void of history towards something which is positive and hopeful in the new city of Berlin in Germany? And that building, it was not a building that originated in a library, in an archive, because it was so much part of my own life, my own history, my parents' history. It was not something I did it as a sort of scholarly commitment, but it was a visceral response to the program.
And I mean, just thinking about that, because as you said, it was your first building, and of course you seem to almost have had two careers in a way. Before that, you were very much a theorist and a teacher, and then I gather that you were then 52 and you became a practicing architecture and are now working all over the world. I mean, has one informed the other, and which period are you most proud of?
Well, it's hard to make a distinction because theory flows into practice and vice versa. Practice is informed by theory. So of course there's a big difference between making a drawing, as I did for many years without ever building something, and the difference between building in a city with all the politics, all the emotions. But there's also continuity, and one uses the sources one has developed a long time ago. And I think that is the tradition of architecture. One of my favorite architects, Piranesi, built only one building.
Yes.
But what an incredible mind, what an incredible artist he was for architecture. So I've been just lucky to be able to, in some strange way, leap from what is considered just theory to really being a practitioner in architecture.
And do you still have time to teach?
I do. I'm a professor in Germany. I teach.
Oh, okay.
I often lecture. I'm now involved in the free internet course to the world, where I have students from more than 100 countries able to work together on projects. So yes, I think it's a very important engagement to be able to teach and pass on ideas and discuss ideas and debate ideas.
I think that there's a very important connection between education and practice, isn't there, I think. I wanted to talk, in preparation for this, there was a TED interview, which I really I enjoyed, and you said in there that the role of architecture to take you places to take you to places that you've never been before. Now, of course, that was said in a particular context, but I just wondered in another context, the sort of projects that you're working on at the moment, and where are you going to take us next? Where is your architecture going to take us next?
It's a fantastically difficult question to answer, but you want to go to places that have never been there before, to a new light, to a new sense of being, to a new sense of the world, because the world is changing every second with every breath, and that's why one wants to take the architecture towards a space that has never been simulated before, never seen before, never experienced before, because it's a space of the present and of the future.
And if I may say so, I think your architecture actually achieves that. Some of the spaces are just the most wonderful spaces to experience.
Thank you so much.
Daniel Libeskind, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for sharing us your thoughts and your direction and your influences in architecture.
Thank you so much. I'm very honored to be here.
Thank you. Thank you.